Hey, happy Friday. This week we'll talk about macOS beating Windows to ARM, we'll talk about Realme copying Xiaomi once again, and we'll talk about Mixer dying a pretty unceremonious death. But before we get to the tech news, last week everyone said that my intro was too long, so we made a shorter version of the same intro. Check it out, let me know how I feel about this one down in the comments. Okay, my pick of the week is going to be Apple putting their own ARM-based silicon into the Mac. And that means that they'll actually have their own A-series processors in the iPhone, in the iPad, and in the Mac going forward as well. The transition on the Mac side will apparently take around 2 years. And after that, there'll be no more Intel silicon in any of the new upcoming Macs anymore, and it'll all just be running on A-series processors. So with these new chips, Apple is promising better performance, better battery life, the ability to run iOS apps on the Mac, maybe the ability at some point to run macOS apps on iPads, who knows. But of course, for any of these benefits to materialize, third-party developers really have to buy into this, right? They have to make sure that their apps work well on these new ARM chips. That is always a super difficult task, and I'm very fascinated by how differently Apple approached this transition versus how Microsoft approached their adoption of Windows 10 on ARM. So let's actually put those against each other and compare them. The first difference is just how all-in Apple went on this. Like, they announced that their entire Mac line, everything from the smallest Mac to the biggest Mac, is going to transition over to this chip. It's been decided, there's no ifs and whens and whatevers, it's going to happen. With Microsoft, they were like, yo, we have a new chip that we support. If somebody wants it, here it is, and that's it. Like, it's a significantly smaller commitment. Second, with Apple, there's actually a fixed deadline. So they said that they'd complete this transition in 2 years. And that means that if any third-party app makers want their apps to work well on the newer Macs after that, clock is ticking, gotta start optimizing your apps or they'll run like crap after that. Whereas with Windows, there's no deadline. Third is that Apple has shown real commitment to their platform by making sure that all of their apps, including tricky ones like Final Cut Pro, work on it natively on day one, where Microsoft has not. And just take a look at their new Microsoft Edge browser, the one that they have just literally rebuilt from scratch, and that was not available natively on ARM for multiple months. And fourth and last on my list, Apple then made sure that their most important third-party developers would actually port over their apps to this new platform on day one as well. So the Microsoft Office suite bizarrely works on the new ARM chips, apparently natively or at least close to it, and the Adobe Creative Cloud apps as well. Microsoft, not so much. I mean, 3 years into Windows 10 on ARM, the Adobe Creative Cloud suite basically still doesn't work on Windows 10 on ARM. Or if it does so with terrible performance and with emulation. And I could go on, but I think the differences in approaches are pretty clear, and I think they make a ton of sense if you think about these companies and how they function. Microsoft, of course, has a ton of enterprise customers with a lot of legacy software that they're not willing to change from or upgrade from or break. So, of course, Microsoft can't push these huge changes through as abruptly as Apple can, who has significantly less of that to deal with. On the other hand, Apple has complete control over their whole tech stack, right? They make the chips, they make the laptops and desktops, and they make the operating system. So they can just push these changes through much more strictly, whereas Microsoft kind of has to ask Qualcomm to make chips for them. They have to ask Dell and Lenovo to put those chips into their laptops, and then they have to ask third-party app makers to actually, adopt their apps to this new platform and so on. So clearly, it's not an apples to apples comparison. It's more of an apples to Microsoft's comparison. But I still think that there's actually a lesson to be learned here. Microsoft is in a vicious cycle, right? They can't commit fully to a project like this up front, which means that their partners, like the app makers and the chip makers and the laptop makers, they will not commit to it because they feel unsure about the future of the project. And then consumers find a product that is subpar, so they actually don't like it, they don't buy it, which means that Microsoft feels demotivated, that they don't invest, and then this keeps going and going and going. And in the end, the transition might just fail completely, even though maybe the original idea was actually good. So in this area, I really wish that Microsoft learned a little bit from Apple and actually decided which of these transitions are important and then fully got behind them. Okay, my win of the week is going to be that Realme has just finished copying the last step from Xiaomi's master plan. So first they copied their logo, right? They took Redmi. Realme is just, you just squeeze the A and the L, becomes a D. Now it's Redmi. Then they copied their whole online sales model and pricing strategy. Then they copied their business model of putting ads into their smartphone user interfaces. That's how they make money. And finally, they also copied the whole ecosystem strategy of Xiaomi. They posted this image of their ecosystem strategy, and it is just hilarious to me how it looks exactly the same like that from Xiaomi. Anyway, why is this a win? Well, I think this is a copycat strategy, obviously, but I also think it's an effective strategy, and this is exactly the right step for Realme to take right now. I mean, the simple math of these companies is that they sell their phones extremely cheaply, more or less at cost or maybe even at a loss, and then they have to make up for that by making money from other places, right? They show their users ads, they try to upsell them on services, and they try to upsell them on all kinds of hardware, on fitness stuff, wearable ear stuff, robot vacuum cleaners, whatever. And they have to sell quite a lot of that for this actually to be worth it. Okay, my fail of this week is going to be how Microsoft announced the death of Mixer, their video streaming platform for gamers. And I specifically dislike two things about their announcement. One, the fact that they did the announcement during Apple's WWDC, where obviously all of the tech media was busy covering that. That's a crappy way to avoid bad news. But two, the fact that they then sent most of their community, so both the streamers and the viewers, to Facebook Gaming. That's just generally a company you shouldn't endorse, just in general, but also specifically Facebook is really famous for screwing over all of their video partners in the past. So just don't send your video community over to them. Now, I'm not personally mad at Microsoft for shutting Mixer down in general. I mean, they sure have tried to make it work. They built integrations for the Xbox, they built integrations for the Windows 10 game bar. They paid a lot of money to bring a lot of really big streamers over to the platform. They spent a lot of money and tried really hard, and it just didn't work. I think on the web they have like 15 million views per month, whereas Twitch has 900 million, just for comparison. I think on the Android Play Store, their downloads are like a tenth of that of Twitch. So clearly this was just never gonna catch up with the big boys, and it kind of made sense for the company to just shut it down. But just the way they announced it was not the best. And for Crrowd, I actually have two pretty good updates this week. One is that for our tech knowledge quiz, we now have a new quiz tool, and it works so much better than the old one. You can actually see your answers being right or wrong in real time. You can see the timer in real time. It actually doesn't have any submission form limits. It works really well on the phones and so on. It just makes taking this quiz so much more fun. Like every Friday, we have 20 brand new questions. So if you want to test your tech knowledge, the link is down in the description. And like always, if you get at least 15 of them right and you choose to leave an email address, then we'll actually send you an invite code to the Crrowd app as well. As for the Crrowd app itself, we have just pushed a new update to the Play Store, and the biggest change in it is that it comes with a new search UI. So now you see the top 10 brands and categories listed out on the main search screen, and you can then tap on the See All button, and then that will show you an alphabetically sorted list that you can scroll through, so it makes it much easier to find any brand or category that you're looking for. It also gets rid of the performance issues that we had with the previous design, so now everything should be super fast and snappy. So check it out, and if you have any feedback for us for Crrowd, you can actually join our Crrowd Discord and chat with us there. And that's it for this week's Friday checkout. If you have any questions or comments about the Friday checkout, leave them down below. If you have any suggestions for future topics for maybe the next Friday checkout, you can tweet it at me at TechAltar, and I'll see you in the next video.